You want to become a billionaire? Because I'm going to show you what could be the easiest possible way in your lifetime, which is putting money into Bitcoin. And exactly how much money into Bitcoin? We're going to be crunching those numbers in this video according to Michael Saylor's projections. I'll let you in on a little bit of a secret. These answers absolutely shocked me, so I have a feeling you're going to be surprised with what you see. So if you don't already know who Michael Saylor is, he graduated from MIT in 1987 with a double major in aeronautics and astronautics, rocket science. He predicted the mobile wave revolution and made billions of dollars from it, but most importantly, he puts his money where his mouth is. He's not just out there talking random big numbers about Bitcoin. He personally owns over $700 million of Bitcoin. His company MicroStrategy own almost $7 billion worth of Bitcoin. So if you want to join this Billionaire Bitcoin Boys Club, how much money should we be putting in? If these sorts of videos excite you, could you please hit that like button down below for me, put on your big orange hat, and let's get into it. Starting with the big elephant in the room. Before we throw around ludicrous numbers like millions, billions, and even trillions, yeah, we're going to touch on the trillions in this video. We have to ask the question, why? Why does Michael Saylor think that Bitcoin is going to continue to grow indefinitely? Well, let me give you the 60-second summary from Michael Saylor's recent Bitcoin presentation, and if you want to go and watch the full 45 minutes, I'll link it up in the description below. I do highly recommend it. It could be the most valuable thing that you've ever done in your life. So maybe open a new tab now and watch it after this video. So Michael Saylor begins his presentation by talking about how fiat is collapsing. And although it's really hard to see when we're up close looking year to year, when you zoom out 100 years, it's very obvious. Consumer inflation says it's collapsing at about 2% a year, but it's fake news. This 2% only refers to the goods and services that are easiest to produce. And in reality, the strongest fiat, the US dollar, is actually collapsing at a rate of 7% per year when you compare it to all assets. And this is the best performing fiat, the US dollar. All other currencies are collapsing at an average rate of 14% a year around the world. Now, some people already know this, but they mistakenly think that the stock market is the one that's going to save them. But they haven't seen this graph. This is the stock market plotted against the money supply. And you can see that the growth of the biggest businesses in the US are simply keeping up with inflation. In order to beat monetary inflation over the long term, we need to convert currency into assets that are scarce, desirable, portable, durable, and maintainable, which is, of course, at the moment, Bitcoin. Michael Saylor goes on to describe Bitcoin as the apex commodity, apex property, apex technology, apex money, and apex ETF. So again, if you're not a huge believer in this yet, I'm not going to go into the details here, but go watch that presentation. If Saylor's theory holds true, he estimates that Bitcoin will capture the value from these other assets slowly over time. And in this example on the screen, you can see that he's projected that Bitcoin will capture 50% of the value of gold, 5% of the value of collectibles, 5% fine art, 15% of the value of stocks, 15% real estate, 30% bonds, and 30% of the money, which would give Bitcoin a price of $10 million a token. Fantastic, but that's nowhere near $1 billion. So how much money do we need to be putting into Bitcoin right now in order to see $1 billion valuation for our net worths? So in his presentation, Saylor predicts that Bitcoin will grow at an average of double of the S&P 500 over the next 100 years, which would be 14%. But as you can tell from Bitcoin's current performance, it's way outperforming that prediction. Saylor says that Bitcoin is currently in a high growth mode since it's such a new asset class, and this high growth mode will last probably another 10 years and return about 21% per year according to Saylor. So to summarize before we plug our numbers in, Michael Saylor thinks that Bitcoin will grow at least 21% per year for the next decade and then swap over to about 14% annual growth for the next 100 years. So if we were to put a mere $1,000 into Bitcoin right now, you could see after 1 year, we would have $1,210. After 2 years, we'd have $1,464. After 3 years, we'd have $1,771. After 7 years, we'd have almost $4,000. After 10 years, we'd have $6,700. After 25 years, we'd have almost $12,000. And this is where compound interest gets crazy. Because after 25 years, we'd have $11,725. But after 50 years, we would have $1.4 million from our original investment of just $1,000. And after 100 years, we would actually hit the $1 billion mark, having a $2.1 billion portfolio. But I know what most people are going to say, oh, I'm not going to be around in 100 years. Well, that's probably true. And obviously you don't care about your children. So let's crank things up at the start and see if we can hit the billionaire mark in our lifetimes. So instead of $1,000, what if we scrap together $100,000 and put it into Bitcoin today? How long will it take for us to become a millionaire, billionaire, and trillionaire? Which, if trillionaire is not as mind-blowing as you think, there's no one in the world who's currently a trillionaire. We'd have 4 times the money that Elon Musk would currently have. It would take you just 85 years with a starting investment of $100,000. Of course, there are some really important things to talk about here, because you can't just be the guy on YouTube who's talking about how to become a trillionaire off Bitcoin with $1,000. First of all, it's important to understand that this inflation is what is actually making Bitcoin go so high. It's more like the US dollar is equally devaluing as Bitcoin is rising, because there are currently no trillionaires in the world, at least no trillionaires that want to be known. You may argue someone like Vladimir Putin or the royal Saudi family may have somewhere close to that in asset. 100 years ago, there were no billionaires. John D. Rockefeller was the closest thing to it with his massive oil empire. This just goes to show the insane rate of inflation, because maybe in the next 100 years, there probably won't be any trillionaires either, because we might just end up calling them Bitcoinaires.